Dimakatso Lushuru joins me now for more. Now, Dimakatso, a very warm good afternoon to you. Let's talk about this recession. It's our breaking story, of course, at this hour. But what's been blamed for this recession?
Well, Timelo, you recall, as the DDG there explains, that a recession is 2 consecutive quarters of negative growth. So we see that in the last quarter of 2014, as you'd recall, we experienced that load shedding throughout the country. And if you look at the actual figures, you see that the biggest contributors to this negative growth in the last quarter was the trade sector. Timelo, you and I spoke a couple of weeks ago, regarding the labor stats. And as you would recall, we saw that the retail sector, which usually hires a lot of people around the festive season, had one of the largest job losses. That tells you that that sector did not perform well. It was anticipated that perhaps we'll see a slower growth, but this extent, Dumelo, of the contraction was not anticipated. A lot of economists had anticipated that we'll perhaps see a negative 0.2 year on year, but it's worse than that. If you look at the quarterly figures between quarter 3 and quarter 4, we see that the negative growth, the contraction is 1.4%. We even see that the actually third quarter was worse than we thought, because initially we thought the economy had contracted by 0.6% in the third quarter, but now today we find out that actually it is at 0.8%. We see also the agricultural sector declining, Dumelo. We know that last year that sector was battling foot and mouth disease, it was battling drought. So those are some of the factors that are coming in there. We understand from the DGG today that this is the lowest growth that we've seen since 2009.
Indeed, Dimakatso, and just looking at the statistics here, I see the primary and the secondary sector, also the tertiary sectors, definitely all three of them declining. The primary sector, they're declining by 0.4%, and we can go on. But what have been some of the worst performing sectors?
As I just mentioned there, we see, especially with regards to the primary sector, agriculture being the main culprit there. We see the only sectors that have literally grown is household consumption, is finance and business services. Those are the only sectors that had a positive contribution to the economy. So that tells you how big the problem is. All sectors, you name construction, mining, manufacturing, all down. Yesterday we saw statistics from the APSA PMI, which shows us that the manufacturing sector is actually in a contraction, and this has been for the past 5 months. So, Dumelo, there is no sugarcoating this. If you look at how fast the population is growing, that is GDP per capita, that means that the country's economy is definitely in a recession. The annual figures, even the projection last year by the Reserve Bank was, I think, 0.5%, and now we're getting that the economy actually grew at 0.2%. So a real slowdown if you compare to 2018, which grew by 0.8%. It doesn't seem that we're doing well in any of these sectors. You look at fisheries, the agriculture, fisheries, and forestry contributing 0.2 percentage points to GDP. Construction, as I mentioned, down 0.2. This contribution a negative 0.2 percentage points to GDP. Trade, as I mentioned, 3.8% down. So all sectors, from, as you mentioned, all the primary, tertiary, and secondary sectors, all not doing well. So we hope that some of the measures by Tito Mboweni that were announced last week, such as not increasing taxes, will help boost economic growth, because that is what we need to see, some uptick in terms of jobs in the economy, Dumelo.
Let's touch on the impact of load shedding for a moment, Dimakatso, because global financial agencies and institutions have often warned that load shedding in the country and the challenges which Eskom is currently facing are not looking good. They're not attractive for business or even, consumer markets in the country right now. So how badly do you think load shedding had impacted these figures?
So, they're not able to quantify exactly how big the impact of load shedding has been. But we know, if we look at the electricity sector, I'm just looking at the figures now, trying to find the figure, because we know that electricity also was down. It's also contracted because obviously there wasn't any electricity being created in the economy. So the impact of that is quite huge, because it affects all the industries. It affects these massive employing industries such as mining, such as manufacturing, and also, Dumelo, in terms of investor confidence. That's the one thing that's been flagged, as you mentioned, by ratings agencies, by the likes of IMF and the World Bank, that if you don't have the security of electricity supply, there's no way that you can attract investment. I mean, we know that the president has been out and about trying to attract investment, much needed investment into the economy, and that's not forthcoming. Just talking about investment, interestingly, if you look at the last quarter, investment into the economy contracted by 10%. So that shows you that from government side, point of view, government doesn't have any money, so they're not investing in the economy. Business is not investing in the economy. How can they? There is no electricity, So it is a huge problem that needs to be attended to. And we know that a lot of people have been critical about the money that Treasury or government has given to Eskom. But the reality is this has to be sorted for the economy to get going, because without electricity, we cannot do anything. Investors can't come and open smelters or any form of companies if we know that for 4 hours per day or however many hours per day you'll be shut down. That is, that adds in terms of input costs, and it's not, attractive in terms of investment. And we do need to definitely sort that out to attract that much-needed investment.
Dibangas, I'm going to leave you shortly, but before I do, I mean, we know that on the 27th of March, we expect, of course, Moody's to release its assessment on the country. And I mean, everyone in the country is quite worried about, the economy facing yet another, lack of consumer and business confidence. I mean, what is the risk of a credit downgrade right now that Stats SA has just mentioned that we have officially fallen into recession?
Listen, Dumelo, if you talk about a downgrade, that has already been priced in already. I mean, the expectation is that we'll be downgraded by many people. Moody's has been very kind to us, very generous, because if you look at growth, if you look at a fiscal policy, we really don't have anything going for us. If you look at debt to GDP, that's over 60% right now. The deficit is creeping up. If you look at the wage bill, which is part of that fiscal policy, there is no certainty that Tito Mboweni will be able to get the unions on his side. So that means that the government will be spending and borrowing more to pay those salaries, right? And there isn't enough revenue because the economy is not growing. So we are in real trouble. But the thing is, if you look at the markets, if you look at bond yields, already you see that in terms of the premium of yields that we're paying, that the downgrade has already been priced in. So it's a matter of, okay, let's get this done and over with. But we don't know as yet, Dumelo, what the actual impact of it will be, especially on the rand, especially on things like inflation. But certainly with regards to markets, we've seen a lot of outflow of capital last year. So we know that there's something that might come. We hope that Moody's will stay and give us a bit of time. But, as we say, at the moment, it could go either way. We don't know where the light is going to come from. We hope that these reprieve in terms of income, personal income taxes will help boost, or encourage you and I, Dumelo, to go buy some more and encourage those shoppers and help grow the economy. But everything that they've put in place is going to take some time. And, 27th of March is here, right? So already Moody's has put us in negative territory. So the outlook is already negative. So after that, the only way to go is a downgrade.
Absolutely, Dimakaso. And I mean,
and maybe, some are saying perhaps.
Yes, Dimakaso.
Some are saying perhaps that's what we need. Some are saying that perhaps that's what we need. That's maybe we need the IMF to come and help us to sort out our books, because it doesn't look like we're willing to cut that spending. Because as you heard the finance minister saying that the budget, that's not austerity. If austerity were to come, we'll cut the departments, we'll cut the ministers. Perhaps we need somebody to encourage and nudge us towards making those crucial cuts and structural reforms that we need. But the budget is a starting point.
Yeah.
But whether it will be enough or not, we don't know.
I mean, I think at the bottom of this, we have to think about the ordinary South Africans that are affected by this recession, that are affected by these, announcements of, downgrades by, the likes of Moody's. It's easy, for, I suppose, the elite or bureaucracy to have conversation at a very high level about us having to take time to recuperate the economy.
Absolutely.
But then what happens to the ordinary South African? But thank you so much. That is our reporter, Dimakatso Lishuru, just updating us on the breaking story coming in there that States SA had made the announcement that South Africa's economy is officially in recession.